Call the meeting to order. This is the June 27th, 2025 regular meeting of the PRT board. I ask everyone to please rise if you're able for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please stand for a moment of reflection. And thank you. Begin with the roll. Member Chairman. Here. Member Brussels.
Here.
Member Fan. Here. Member Totten.
Here.
Senator Williams. Here. Member Sakara.
Here.
Member McClenny.
Here.
Member Berger.
Here.
Member Doyle.
Here.
Representative Abney.
Here.
Thank you. All members present. First item of business is the approval of the minutes from the May 23rd, 2025 regular meeting of the board. May I have a motion?
Motion.
Second. Hearing motion second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item of business will be the report from the Chief Executive Officer, Catherine Coleman.
Good morning, everyone. May I please have a moment of silence for the following former employees and one active employee who have passed away since last we met. Operators Jack Bauman, David Blackhall, Ronald Holloway, Donald Klein, Anthony Probiano, and Albert Sossel, and LRT System Supervisor Donald Max. Thank you. Well, this is the meeting that none of us wanted to come to. I know nobody in the public wanted to have this conversation, and we absolutely at PRT did not want to have this conversation either. As our board considers adoption of our annual budget this morning, we know a lot of folks are watching, not just here in the room, but all across Allegheny County, all across the Commonwealth here in Pennsylvania. From riders in the South Hills, whose silver line is on the chopping block, to residents in the 19 municipalities who may lose transit service altogether. The stakes are high, and they are very real. For them and for us, this isn't just about line items. This is the ability to get to work, to school, to the doctor, to care for a loved one, to a movie, to your house of worship. This is how you get around for your life. So let me be clear today. Today's budget presentation and board votes are required steps in a larger, still unfolding process. PRT is legally required to adopt a balanced budget by the turn of the fiscal year. Our fiscal year runs July through June, so the new fiscal year begins next Tuesday, the 1st of July. Thus, we must have a balanced budget adopted by Monday, and this is our last regularly scheduled board meeting prior to the budget needing to be adopted. When we say balanced budget, we are required to look at available revenues, reasonable and logical expenses, and adopt a budget that lives within those. Last year, the legislature considered transit funding, but it did not pass both houses, and this year the budget is still under active consideration. Therefore, we are going with our conservative projections of looking on a 10-year time frame of what we know could happen. We must adopt a budget, but this is not the final step in this process. Law also gives the board the authority to adopt amended budgets, and our intention has always been to close out this fiscal year with what we knew was going to happen, and then come back to our board with an amended budget when we have clarification or funding from the legislature. So this is a step, but this is not the final step. It is a required step, but one that we look forward to coming back and amending in a future board meeting, and boy, I hope that's sooner rather than later. As lawmakers in Harrisburg continue to consider our state budget, including proposals for new transit investment, our flexibility remains crucial. Today's vote does not mean that we are resigned to cutting up to 35% of service or implementing fare changes. It is the first step in the fiscal conversation of what next year looks like. It's simply giving us a balanced budget that we can plan with. And again, our intent coming back to the board with a revised budget based on a state funding package, including transit, so we can keep our service on the road. We aren't done with this conversation, and we certainly are not done with this fight. What this means for next year's service, however, pretty much remains uncertain. We know lawmakers on both sides of the aisle are still heavily engaged on this issue. We are grateful to be part of this conversation. We remain hopeful that the voices of the thousands of riders and employees and vendors and business owners and just folks who are concerned about our region, the folks we've heard from in the past few months, results in a favorable outcome. Now, to our riders and residents, we hear you. To our neighborhoods and communities that would be devastated by these cuts, we hear you. For some folks, this would make life difficult. For other folks, this makes life impossible, and we hear you. We know how important it is not just to get to work, but doctor's appointments or to visit with friends. To our board, thank you for your continued leadership and taking this important step. It is not easy. It is not one that staff wants to present you with, and we appreciate your steadfast leadership. We know these decisions are not easy. This requires balancing our urgent needs with today for a long-term vision of what transit can do, not just in this agency, but for the people we serve. And we are grateful for your leadership. And to all our partners in Harrisburg, thank you for your deliberation and the difficult work in budgeting and a time of change. It's an understatement, I think, in competing priorities. There's so much at stake, not just for Pittsburgh or Southwestern PA or the county, for the entire Commonwealth and all 67 counties that have some type of transit in them. That's every county. Hundreds of thousands of Pennsylvanians depend on public transit every day. This is a statewide issue. The outcome significantly impacts all of us. Our region's future depends on transit and getting folks to all the things which make Allegheny County amazing. It's how we grow, how we compete, and how we make opportunity real for everybody. So let us build the future our region deserves with a transit system that's worthy of the people we serve. So again, today is a required step in moving forward to a vision of the transit of what we can actually get and what we actually deserve. Madam Chair, unless there's other questions, I will conclude my remarks.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you.
Okay, because of the speakers that we have are on topic today with what we'll be voting on, we've moved them to the front of the agenda. So we're going to start public comment with Andrew Hussein. Hi, Andrew. Nice to see you, Andrew.
Thank you. Good morning, and thanks for putting public comment first this morning. So I'm Andrew Hussein, president of the Allegheny County Transit Council, and mainly I'm here today to urge the board to in the PRT to please minimize the cuts that these harms are proposed, or the harms that these cuts could bring, and ideally, if at all possible, to since Harrisburg wants to delay, hopefully we can take a cue from them and delay actually implementing these cuts, because literally one of our sister agencies up in Philly, SEPTA, has just approved their devastating cuts. And we know very well with cuts these severe that if they're allowed to happen, they're going to be not only devastating and draconian, but very hard to reverse, even if we do get the funding, because historically it's always an uphill battle to restore service and get ridership back once you lose it. And at this juncture right now, following COVID, we cannot really afford to shoot ourselves in the foot and basically chop any recovery off the kneecaps. So I would very strongly urge PRT and the board to not move forward with these cuts, or if they do, to delay rather than voting for the cuts as proposed. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. As Catherine said at the top here, this is something that none of us wants to see happen. I understand the situation that we all find ourselves in. I find it unconscionable that we are in this situation, but I appreciate your stewardship of an agency that direly needs it at this time. I've talked a lot about what this means to the region, what this means to people who are in distress. I think today is time to tell a little bit of my own story as it relates to transit. In early 2014, I was in a situation where I had to surrender my license for 30 months. I was 40 years old, lived by myself. I sold my car because I didn't want the temptation in the yard to get in and go somewhere. I never thought that I would need the very thing that I was advocating for us to have during the fight for Act 89. And here I am at a point wondering, how am I going to keep my job, get groceries, keep my house? Over the 30 months without that license, I learned how to use this system and maximize that with also using my bike to get pretty much anywhere I needed to in Allegheny County. And my job required a lot of time out of the office. I actually felt liberated as a result of that. And I remember the first couple of days after driving again, thinking, wow, I forgot what road rage feels like. This is terrible. That habit keeps with me today in how I live my life. It's been a game changer for me. I have come to appreciate, I've had to schlep groceries on the bus when everything else was closed and we had 18 inches of snow and you can't bike in that. I watched as my financial situation got healthier as a result of that. Last year, many of you are aware of the bicycle crash that I had coming to work, where I had shattered both wrists, had 9 other fractures, and was out of work for 3 to 4 months. I had to get back to work. I could not use my wrists to drive my car, and the bus was there for me. I acknowledge that I have some privileges that many people don't have, including knowing that there are other ways to live my life and get around. I also know that lots of people don't know that they have those opportunities available to them, even if they have that privilege. I wonder what happens to people who end up in the situation that I found myself in 2014, where I couldn't drive for 2.5 years after having a life of sort of your typical American middle-class person. And I wonder if people with these cuts will have the opportunity today, once these are made in the future, I hope they are not, to recover from some life-changing events that threaten to bring down their career, their livelihood, and maybe even their connections to their family and their community. I appreciate where we are. I also recognize from a personal experience how crucial it is that we keep this service and grow it. And I pray that Harrisburg gets the message and does what we need to have them do. Thank you very much.
Speaker is Christine Mitchell-Wallace. Do we know if Christine Mitchell-Wallace? So Christine, okay, I'll just make a note of that. If Christine pops in later, would you mind letting me know, please? Thank you. Amy Zeiss, I should say. Is Amy online? Yes. Okay, Amy?
Hi, good morning. Can you hear me?
Morning, Amy. Yes, we can, Amy.
Great, thank you. I will be honest, I forgot that the budget discussions were today, so I'm a little embarrassed. But I do want to begin by saying I too am really concerned about the future of our transit and our whole region should PRT lack proper funding. And I have the most animosity towards those in the state leadership who have acted like this was coming out of nowhere and a big surprise. It's been crisis years in the making, and I appreciate the PRT's leadership for your stewardship through this really difficult time. That being said, my main intent in coming today was just to relay some personal experiences as a rider. You are probably all aware that service changes went into effect on June 22nd. I really appreciate that. First of all, the Wood Street station is reopened. I have to remind you all that I've been here many, many times to complain about the temporary stop. The stop on Strawberry Way was active from July 2023 until June 2025. We never got proper signage. There was never a bench, never a shelter, basically nothing. It was a huge embarrassment the way that was handled. That being said, the new stations look great so far. I appreciate seeing signage up already. I appreciate that the transit app and Google apps are showing the new routing. However, that being said, not all the stops are finished, and there's been so much confusion from riders downtown trying to understand where to stop. I understand that the new stations have been a big investment and a long build process, but I really urge PRT in these circumstances to try to do more to communicate with riders. It was not necessarily clear to riders, even myself, someone who rides daily, where I'm supposed to stand in the new routing. And yeah, second, I've also mentioned this before, but I want to stress deeply how helpful it is when I do actually get SMS text alerts about service issues. However, the only other place for me to find service issues is on Twitter or X. I think it's a disservice to your riders. Nobody can publicly see this information without giving up personal information to a third-party company owned by the richest man in the world. As riders, I should be able to go on your website, True Time, any number of spaces that don't require login and see service disruption information. Catherine Kellerman addressed the board in her opening comments in April of last year, announcing and touting that there was going to be a new service disruption platform available for riders, that there was going to be information about how to sign up for it. None of that has materialized in 15 months. So whatever you can do during this financial crisis to improve rider communication and access to real-time information, I would be so grateful for. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Last speaker is Nicholas Rizzio. 12 minutes.
All right, good morning, everybody. My name is Nick Rizzio. I live downtown at the Clark Building right over there. Like Amy, I also didn't know that this was the vote for the updated budget. I thought we had more time. I understand this is a hard decision and a lot of it's really not in our control. We're waiting on the state. I hope that the state comes to a resolution as quickly as possible. I also wanted to speak about some of the new changes to the downtown routing adjustments for the new service. I am in support of the new bus lanes and the new routing for the 61 routes. I've been really tired of the temporary stops on Liberty Ave, as well as the weird detour on Smithfield Street and so on. It is much faster now, so I do appreciate all of your work on that. It's been a huge improvement. I also wanted to express my concern with the way that the detours have been communicated regarding the fact that the new shelters are not open yet, so people are have to stand at a different stop. I helped over a dozen commuters this week who were standing at 6th Avenue and Wood Street get to their correct stop at Liberty right before 6 underneath the Evo Quas sign. I even had a bus driver refuse to drop me off at a temporary stop. And I said to her, hey, this is a temp stop. And she said, no, it's not. And then kept on driving. The communication about detours has been a persistent challenge. I have a iPhone 13 mini. It has a tiny little screen, and the information about where the temporary stops are on your homepage. The little link at the top, it's on page 9 out of 11. And someone who is looking on their phone has to read through 11 pages of dense text to figure out where these temporary stops are. Most people interact with public transit not by looking at a long page like this. They interact with public transit by using an app. I know I've heard from customer service. They have suggested use True Time. Respectfully, I have to say that true time is a little bit cumbersome for me. I am a software engineer by my trade. That is my job. And personally, I do find true time a little bit hard to use. So I do use the Transit app. This is actually a beta version, so supposedly I'm not supposed to show this. But unfortunately on Transit, Transit does not even show the temporary stops on, on the user interface. I know I'm not going to go into the whole explanation about GTFS and so on. What I will say is that other cities do leverage the GTFS protocol to show closed stops so that the apps directly understand and show in their user interface, like a red X. When I went to Seattle, they always do this. SEPTA does a little bit better of a job of using GTFS than we do. So I would just encourage us to build more goodwill amongst our ridership and help discretionary riders who are really important right now with our funding crisis. I hope that we can make some improvements in the future with detour communication. Thank you all for your time, and thank you for pushing forward for public transit funding for Pittsburgh. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, moving on to the report from the Performance and Oversight Committee, Chair McLennan.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning to everyone here. The Performance Oversight Committee met last week, and I have 2 resolutions for the board's consideration. The committee first reviewed 6 procurement items and determined the bids to be in accordance with PRT's procurement policies and procedures and the prices to be fair and reasonable. The Performance Oversight Committee recommends authorizing the award of bids listed in the resolution for the total amount of $4,888,588.38. My fellow members, I respectfully request the board approve this resolution.
With that, may I have a motion to approve?
Motion. Second.
Second, questions, discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
The second resolution seeks approval to exercise the second option year with Aon Risk Services Central Incorporated to provide property and casualty risk management services. PRT entered into the initial 3-year agreement in June 2021 for a total not to exceed amount of $285,000 and later exercised the first option year to extend the agreement through September 30th, 2025, and increasing the total authorized amount to $380,000. Staff has determined that the services performed by Aon have been satisfactory and in compliance with the agreement. Therefore, the Performance Oversight Committee is recommending approval to extend the term of the agreement for 1 additional year through September 30th, 2026, and to increase the total authorized not to exceed amount to $475,000. My fellow members, I respectfully request the board approve the resolution.
Thank you. Pat, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion.
Second. Hearing a motion second, any questions or discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Unless there are any questions, that concludes my report.
Next item of business will be a report of the Planning and Stakeholders Relations Committee, Chair Turman.
Sure. Good morning, Chair Liptak, fellow board members and stakeholders. The Planning and Stakeholders Relation Committee met last week. I have a few items for the board. Staff presented a summary of the public comment period, service reduction or fare increase related to the funding crisis. The public comment period for fare increases and service reductions ran from March 31st until June 18th. PRT received public comments at 3 public hearings by online forums, letters, phone calls, mail, and by other media. As of June 12th, the agency received 3,924 comments. Of these comments, 2,786 responded from Pittsburgh, 896 from other Allegheny County municipalities, 161 from surrounding counties, 117 from other parts of Pennsylvania and out of state. The most responses came from Beachview, Bethel Park, Northside, and the Wilkinsburg area. Respondents overwhelmingly opposes service cuts with 98% against and opposes fare increase with 60% against. Opposition raised the fare increases as income levels decrease. Those making less than 25,000 annually registered at 76% opposition rate. Overall, those numbers are even greater with access paratransit respondents, with 98% opposing service cuts and 80% opposing fare increase. Service changes impacts to survey respondents included a loss of flexibility in their lives, increasing travel time, loss of access, community impact, job issues, medical care, and school and child care. Respondents said that the fare increase will impact their community and loved ones, result in fewer trips, force riders to choose between travel or essentials, forced to switch travel modes force them to switch travel modes, or they would not be able to afford to ride at all. PRT staff will now finalize and create a Title VI analyst report consistent with PRT's federally required Title VI program. Any changes to the overall narrative of the public comments will be presented to the board to any final staff recommendations considering implementation of service reductions and fares. In addition, staff will continue to look for ways to optimize service changes and minimize rider impacts, and remain optimistic that the state legislators will pass a bill that includes new funding to support transit across the Commonwealth. If the cuts are necessary, PRT will aim to provide as much advance notice as possible to riders. In the meantime, continue to ask the riders to contact their elected officials to voice their support for transit funding. Second, staff presented a resolution seeking authorization to enter into agreement with a pool of firms for the General Planning Service, R24-06. PRT uses consultants to support general planning services. This resolution will allow PRT to contract multiple consultants under 6 categories: general planning services contracting with HDR, WSP, and Gensler; transit-oriented development support contracting with Gensler and Hatch; equity support contracting with MBI and WSP; sustainability support contracting with Hatch and Evolve EA; public art implementation and conversation contracting with Evolve EA; service and infrastructure planning contracting with WSP and MBI. This resolution would authorize PRT to use up to $22 million over 3 years from the approved budget for various projects, with the option to extend the contract for 2 additional 1-year terms. Many of the projects in this contract use grant funds to advance transit planning work. So this contract provides staff the maximum flexibility in future grant funding. I am respectfully requesting the board approve this resolution and enter into these agreements. May I have a motion?
Thank you. With that, I'll ask for a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Hearing a motion second, any questions or discussion?
I just have a quick question, which is, are these firms, I know bus line redesign is just a question mark at this point, but are these firms involved with bus line redesign?
They are currently, yes.
That's okay. We can repeat it. It was indicated that they are involved with that. Yes? Is that good?
Just wanted to.
Okay. Anything else? That? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Turner.
Thank you.
Our next report will be from the Finance Committee, Chair Doyle.
Good morning, Madam Chair and fellow board members. The Finance Committee met on Wednesday, June 18th. There were two resolutions in a review of the May 2025 financial results presented at last week's meeting. The first resolution seeks board approval to adopt.
You know, Ally, we're getting a little bit of feedback.
Turn my camera and see if that helps.
Okay,
Can you hear me now? Is that any better?
that's much
Better,
better.
yes.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Thank you.
Okay, sorry about that. Do you want me to start from the beginning?
I think that'd be nice. Thank you.
Okay, sure, no problem. The Finance Committee met on Wednesday, June 18th. There were two resolutions in a review of the May 2025 financial results presented at last week's meeting. The first resolution seeks board approval to adopt the recommended fiscal year 2026 operating and capital budgets and execute local match certifications. The proposed fiscal year 2026 operating budget is $539,256,823. The budget reflects a 0.6 increase over the current 2025 fiscal year budget due to a planned service reduction in February of 2026. The proposed capital budget is $187,888,010. If and when appropriate, PRT will return to the Finance Committee with a proposed amended budget, pending state funding outcomes and decisions regarding transit funding. Requests for a budget reflecting an 8-month deferral of service cuts and a 5-year budget projection based on House Bill 1364 were received from the board and noted by management. My fellow members, I respectfully request the board adopt the fiscal year 2026 operating and capital budgets and execute local match certifications as presented.
Thank you, Chair Doyle. With that, I'll ask for a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
hearing a motion second, any questions or discussion? Imagine we'll have some. Okay, Senator Williams, anyone else have questions or discussion? Bobby?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna go down the line. So we'll start with Member Fan first.
So, we discussed this to some extent in the committee meeting last week. There was public comment earlier from Andrew, and others who've indicated that these cuts, like once implemented, would be very hard to undo. It's much harder to put service back on the street after it's been removed to get those riders back. So I'm hoping that we'll get an update from PRT on what is possible to delay with those cuts, and especially also from a financial perspective, the position that we're placed in once we lose ridership and then continue then to lose funding under the formula for transportation funding and ridership. So yeah, I would love to see that, and I feel I feel many others likely agree. So I just wanted to put forward discussion that we had last week into this board meeting.
Absolutely. Thank you. Senator Williams?
Madam Chair, could we have CEO Catherine?
Absolutely.
For some questions?
Catherine, can you please join the board? Absolutely. Thank you.
It's okay, it'll be okay. Just some clarifying questions so we can set the stage for everyone. This budget that we are looking at today is based off of a 10-year projection where we are projecting out 10 years of what it would look like for revenue and making cuts now to be able to last 10 years. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. The SEPTA budget that they approved yesterday, they are looking at a 5-year timeline.
Yes, we believe it's a 5-year timeline. That's what we have heard from them.
And PRT since 2007 has made about 30% of service cuts, where in that same time period, SEPTA has made about 5%.
According to the National Transit Database, in the past 25 years, well, 25 years by our records, we've cut 36% of our service on the street. According to NTD, in the same window, SEPTA's cut 4%. Now, NTD is something where agencies, anyone receiving federal transit money, self-reports, so it should be an objective way for us to compare apples to apples.
And I understand that that's hard with two different, and we have a lot more that we can see on our budget versus what we can see with what SEPTA is doing with, they have different revenue options, they have multiple counties, they have a different landscape concept.
I would not presume to know somebody else's finances anywhere near the way we know our own.
What we're doing today, so we are approving the budget with a whole set of presumptions for costs and revenue. In that is the fare increases and the service cuts that we've proposed and talked at prior meetings. However, those need a separate vote and approval by this board.
Correct. So the adoption of the budget would be the first step in the process. We have completed our personally, like internally required, but also federally required outreach for service discontinuation or fare changes. However, coming to the authorization of those changes will come back to the board for another vote. So the overall concept is approved, but the change happening at a particular schedule change or the change to the fares would require us to come back to the board for discussion and approval again.
But not necessarily, we are not required to have additional public comment. We could choose, but we are not required to have additional public comment. The public comment that just ended, that we got the report on, fulfills that federal requirement for the as proposed cuts and fare increases.
Yes.
Okay. It's my understanding also that the votes on actually making those fare increases and cuts, the latest we could do it for February, which is presumed in this budget, is September.
Yes.
Okay. And then at the finance committee meeting, I requested trying to see what a 5-year budget, rather than presuming a 10-year budget, look at a 5-year budget, because that appears to be where SEPTA, where Harrisburg is moving, and understanding that what was passed out of the House is not a final, but it doesn't look like discussions are in a 10-year. So I requested you and staff agreed, and and then Bobby also asked about Member Fan asked about what would it look like, what would be the financial impact to delaying those cuts so that we can have a better understanding of the budget that comes out of Harrisburg. The staff is working on responses to those questions, but we do not have those today.
We do not have them finite today, no, ma'am.
I think that is the end of my questions. As Member Fan said, nobody wants to, and I know Catherine, you don't either. Like, no, none of the staff wants to be looking at this type of budget. It is where we are. I appreciate that it's not easy for the members on this board, the staff, drivers, and it will be catastrophic to the people who ride the bus. So I'm keeping that in mind in terms of the vote, and I would really like to see, I know you mentioned in your comments about this is not the final step, and this is the conservative budget and a conservative estimate. And I think, my question and Member Fan's question, I would like to see what a less conservative budget looks like of delaying some of those cuts. And so I'm going to be a no today with the idea that hopefully we can come back and look at what that looks like. So thank you.
I have.
Sure.
From the club? Yes. Yeah, sure. So my comments are to what the vote is today. And I know some of this is going to sound repetitious because I feel like it can't be over clarified because the devastation can't be overemphasized of what can happen. We've heard from Mr. Hussein, we've heard from Mr. Sandvig. So just understanding that a vote today is on the budget and we are able to amend any funding that comes in the future.
Yes, ma'am. We historically, every year I've been here, we've come back to the board with an amendment based on what we knew later in the fiscal year. It's a regular process for us.
And a vote for the budget today is not approving the cuts that are that could happen. That wouldn't occur until at the latest February 2026. Is that correct?
The schedule we have today would be final approval in September with discontinuation of service and changes in February of next year. Yes.
And the understanding is that we're looking into, as a member fan had said, we're looking into delaying those cuts should they happen, hopefully not, but we're looking into different options to delaying those cuts. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then the reason that we're doing this budget approval today is because if we don't, that could cause other consequences that could end up with immediately affecting service. So right now, we're approving a budget to prevent ancillary consequences that could immediately come, while still preserving our right to amend the budget once we find out about funding. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right, no further questions. I just want to thank the staff for clarifying what this vote is today, and just make sure that everyone understands that we understand the devastation that can come from your livelihoods, independence, cost of living. We definitely hear you, and we're continuing the fight. So thank you.
Any other comments? Okay, anyone else here? on the dais? I'll reserve to go before we vote. Representative Abney?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate it. And first and foremost, let me just thank all of the PRT staff really for all of their hard work on this budget that's in front of us. I think especially given all of the complications and the uncertainty with the state budget for mass transit. I know this was not easy for you all to put this together for us today, so I thank you for your work. And, you know, for me, while I understand the reasonings, you know, given for the proposed budget that's really in front of us right now today, I think that my biggest concern with voting on this is I feel like I don't have enough information to really make a well-informed decision today. And it's not necessarily because of the PRT proposed budget in front of us, but it's more so because of where we are with the state budget. You know, I understand that the timing of things are not ideal, as you know, we as the board have to pass this budget by the end of this month. And it's clear that the state budget is not going to be done, obviously, by that time. So I can't at this point predict or prognosticate what mass transit funding will actually be from the state. But what I can tell everybody is that I can confirm that the negotiations for mass transit, they are very active right now and they are very fluid. And me personally, I would just rather keep fighting until the last day humanly possible to get funding for PRT before I make a decision on this budget in front of us today. And so I think for me, Madam Chair, you know, for that reason, I will be an abstention on today's vote, but I do look forward to voting on a revised budget once we have sort of the more written in stone numbers from the state budget. So thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Representative Abney. Else here?
I know I spoke earlier.
Oh, perfect. That's fine. Please.
I actually do have one question, which is,
For Catherine, please come up.
oh, yes,
Come
sorry,
back
to
up.
bring you back
I
up.
want to make sure it's on the record.
So with the window, the requirement window for announcing or voting on service cuts and fare increases, we understood that to be September. But if they were to be implemented in February.
For the actual implementation, yes.
Currently, there isn't a concrete idea of when the state budget will be finalized. There's rumors that it could be in September. So if if there was a possibility of delaying the cuts, what would we need, would, you know, essentially which month would we be, you know, changing that time window? We need to vote in July, or we need to vote in August?
So the September comes up that the amount of time it takes us to be able to do a schedule change, get all the information out that we need to operators internally so we can do the picking of work, we can get folks trained, we can communicate publicly. That is about 5 months. So September would line us up for February. Per contract, we do 3 changes a year. We can always negotiate with ATU about changing those times, like instead of February, maybe it's March, maybe it's April. It's still 5 months out. I do want to stress, and not to be a bureaucrat about this, but the vote today talks about a budget that considers these cuts at some point in the year. The budget itself is built on hours and miles of service, a variable number of head counts. The budget today does not have a thing and it says, you know, discontinue Route 36 on February, whatever. It presumes a certain change in the hours and miles of service. The fiscal year change starts midnight 01 Tuesday, however we run that clock. So as far as notification for that, we are very constrained in being able to change a time frame for us talking about the budget. However, if we adopt a budget, we still can come back to you in July. We'll come back with the updates that you and Senator Williams had asked about on what does a delay look like. We will have good information on that, how far that moves out. We've been our finance team does an amazing job every year. They've been very conservative, watching every penny. So when we come to you have very accurate numbers of what this means for us. So we will come to you in July with that update at a minimum. We do not have a board meeting in August. We regularly are not scheduled to have one in August. So our next one would be September. So if nothing changes and September, a budget has been passed, let's say the budget is passed and we know that we have to make changes, we would have that information then. I think what you might be asking is if it's September and we don't have a budget, what then? And I would have to say, we can come to you in July with an update on what we know. If September comes and we still don't have a state budget, by then we will already know what the impact is of pushing off the cuts that you had recommended us look at 6 to 8 months. We will have good information in front of us to help you steer your decision making. Madam Chair, do you think I should clarify any comments on that, or member Fan, am I getting to your answer?
Yeah, essentially I'm wondering if there's, I mean, I think we're stating we're reserving the right to amend the budget, but if there's a more concrete way to basically schedule that discussion, right, to take place, either, you know, if it would have to be in July, if it would have to be in September.
I'll defer to the chair, but at this point, I would say staff will plan to bring the firmest information we have on a delay, the firmest information we have on what looks like a 5-year outlook. So our goal will be to get you the best possible information for decision-making in July based on what we know today. And if that changes for September, then we'll get that to you. But we will commit that in July, we will say, here's what we know is reality today. And you will have the information to make a decision, even if you want to amend at that point, or if you want to defer an amendment. Does it make sense?
So basically,
It wasn't voted until September, correct? That's where
I want to clarify, at any time, if I may, I don't mean to interrupt. At any time, if we get a funding package sooner than we anticipate, I will call a meeting of the board to vote as expeditious as possible. So I don't want anyone to think that we have to wait until a scheduled meeting. We have that ability to do so, and I will do that, of course, notifying the board in advance of that. Just want to make sure we're clear on that, okay?
Madam Chair.
Yeah, sure. Just want to make sure, Member Fan, are you done?
yeah, I mean, I think that my question was mainly around, having a more concrete sense of returning to this budget, essentially.
Absolutely.
That would happen.
Yes, staff's plan is every finance committee until the state budget is done, and we have clarity that every meeting we are having a discussion with you and sharing that information. And whatever the guidance is we're getting back from committees, you coming up with opportunities and options for you to look at. You will be sick of us. If you're not sick of us already, which I don't know how you're not, but so I think it's fair to say that people don't come into planning, scheduling, finance. People don't come to transit because we think it's going to, turn us into the richest people on the planet. Folks are here because they love Allegheny County. They love the work they do. And they are absurdly passionate about making sure that the folks that rely on us have the absolute best possible service that they do. So it's not a challenge for us to make sure that our staff is ready to go. It's making sure that we can get clarity on what goes out there, but staff is, I mean, already on back of envelopes, looking at what we can do to keep as much possible on the street, to delay any kind of modification as far out as possible. So they are already on that.
Member Brussels?
This is for Catherine, also our solicitor. It's my understanding that if we fail to approve a budget today, that we could be out of compliance with the Second Class County Transportation Act.
Sorry, Sandy?
Yeah. Dr. Brisalis, that's correct. The Second Class County Port Authority Act, which is the law that establishes this agency, specifies that the board has to pass a balanced budget prior to the beginning of the next fiscal year, which, as has been stated, is next week.
And so it's also my understanding, if we fail to pass a budget, we are out of compliance with the act, and there could be a threat of immediate service cuts by failing to pass a balanced budget, even though the budget could be modified if we have new news in the future. Is that correct?
Yes. And let me also note that yesterday, our friends in southeastern Pennsylvania, the SEPTA board adopted what they call their doomsday budget. It's the same scenario you're looking at here, with the same conversation, that they know that they have cuts planned in for them as quickly as August, but they pass a budget to be compliant with code and law and relevant regulations, with the intent that they come back as quickly as possible with an amendment too.
So let me ask your opinion. Is it a reasonable assumption that if we pass this budget, we will be in compliance with the law? Therefore, we will stave off any immediate cuts that we don't want to make, and it gives us time to fight and lobby for additional funding.
So compliance with the law will go to Sandy.
Yeah, that's correct. The consequences you're referring to, Dr. Brisalis, are a lot of our grant funding currently requires us to have a balanced budget on time. And so if we're out of compliance with those covenants, we may lose that grant funding quickly or access to it, and that's a danger. And so if we pass the balanced budget that's before you, we avoid that consequence. And as has been said by many folks so far today, the board has statutory authority to amend the budget at any time it wants to. So passing the budget today gives you that interim posture of being in compliance with law, and you don't need to do anything to specially preserve your right to amend the budget at any time. It's already statutorily allowed.
So it seems to me the prudent thing to do in the best interest of the citizens that we serve is to pass the budget and keep fighting, right?
Yes.
And okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? I'm going to give one at the end before we sum up. I would thank everyone for their comments and questions. I think they're very helpful and provide the perspective for us and for the public. Generally, no one wants to vote for something that they don't like. No one wants to be a part of something that they don't like. But I can tell you what I do like is PRT. I think that the organization is phenomenal. It was a critical part of my bringing development and even moving me into the world. First thing I did when I got my first job is I took the bus to work. You know, it helped me in my own self become a part of the economy, continue to be a part of this region and this community. Do I want to vote for a budget that eventually will lead to potential cuts or fare increases? No, but as a fiduciary, I want to meet our obligations to keep fighting. I want to meet our obligations to keep operating. I want to meet our obligations to provide service as long as we can so we can get the service that we deserve back to this region. So with that, I am going to support this budget, and I really do appreciate the comments from everyone because I think everyone brings a great perspective, and I respect tremendously everyone's perspective and decision on how they will proceed with this vote moving forward. Do we have any additional comments after that?
Sure, I would just like to add, as a part of the Planning and Stakeholders Committee, how staff, help educate our riders, how they turned out for public hearing and voice their opinion, how we get in front of our riders. And I believe today, I believe, deep in my heart, because I've been here for some time, that had we not done a great job in educating and talking about this issue in advance, that this room would be much full. I think we would have a lot more speakers. So I think on behalf of the board and being a proud board member, staff that does the hard work here, I just want to encourage everyone to continue to fight and the good work. And I'm all in.
Okay, with that, I'm going to call for the vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed?
Oppose.
Please note opposed. We note them. Did you note them, Diane?
Yes.
And any abstentions?
Abstention.
Okay, I note that we have 8 votes, correct, Sandy?
That's correct.
Okay, just want to note that for the record. We have 8 votes for the budget passes. Thank you. Thank you everyone for your work. Moving on, Chair Doyle, please move on to your next item.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The second resolution is seeking authorization to establish the 4th-year budget of a 5-year contract with Transdev Services, Inc. to coordinate and administer paratransit services for individuals with disabilities and older adults in Allegheny County, also known as Access. This budget recommends a not-to-exceed amount of $2.4 million, which is a 5.7 increase from the previous fiscal year. My fellow members, I respectfully request the board approve this resolution.
Thank you. With that, I'll take a motion to approve.
Motion.
Second. Motion is second. Any questions or discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Next, the May 2025 financial results were reviewed at the meeting by the committee. It was reported that total operating income for May was below budget by approximately $200,000 due to lower than budgeted fares and access revenue. Total expenses for May were below budget by $4.2 million, with every category below budget except utilities. Through May, while passenger revenue is $245,000 greater than last fiscal year, total operating income is about $1.5 million higher than last fiscal year due to higher interest income. Total expenses through May are almost $400,000 less than last fiscal year, primarily due to a 1-year reduction in pension expense. Total subsidy through May is approximately $107 million lower than last fiscal year due to fully expending all federal stimulus funds early in the fiscal year. Finally, it was reported that PRT ended May with $410.8 million in operating reserves. Unless there are any questions or comments, that concludes my report.
Okay, moving on to the report of the Technology Committee, Chair Berger.
Good morning, Chair and fellow board members. The Technology Committee met on June 18th, and I have 2 resolutions for your consideration today. The committee first reviewed 1 bid. The item presented was for a subscription of a Barracuda email gateway defense and cloud archiving service that would be purchased via a Pennsylvania Department of General Services cooperative purchasing program known as COST. The committee determined the bid to be in accordance with PRT's procurement policies and procedures and cooperative purchases, and the price to be paid would be fair and reasonable. The Technology Committee recommends that the board approve the award of the cooperative purchase agreement to Philicom, Inc. as fully detailed in the resolution for the total amount of $235,800. My fellow board members, I respectfully request that the board approve this resolution.
Thank you. With that, I'll take a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Hearing a motion is second. Any questions or discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
The second resolution presented was for a one-year extension of an existing sole source agreement with Hitachi Rail/S/USA Inc. for the Silver Line Library Hybrid Automatic Trip Stop ATS System. There is no increase to the contract amount of $1,524,439. The committee concluded that these services are needed and respectfully recommends that the board vote in favor of the resolution to authorize this amendment. My fellow members, I respectfully request the board approve this resolution.
Thank you. With that, I'll ask for a motion to approve.
Motion.
Second.
Hearing a motion second. Any questions or discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Unless there are questions, that concludes my report.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I do have new business. It's just a couple announcements, standing committee appointments. First, I do want to, which I didn't do at the beginning, which I apologize, welcome Dr. Brusalis to the board. I've already had, we had a quick call while he was on vacation, which I apologize for bothering you. It was lovely. We were able to talk, and I do appreciate the conversation. And on behalf of the board, I'd like to welcome you and thank you for your contribution.
Thank you. Thank you.
With that, Dr. Brusalis will be a member of the Planning and Stakeholders Relations Committee and also the Technology Committee. And I also would like to, pardon?
I was just cheering.
Announce that Member Berger also has agreed to become a member of the Performance and Boards Oversight and Monitoring Committee. So thank you very much for being a member of that. I have no other business. I just want to make those announcements to committee changes. Our next regular meeting will be Friday, July 25th, as I indicated earlier. If anything changes, I will ask the board to have a special meeting. Hopefully, if that happens, I just want to make sure that everyone's aware that that is something that I'm very willing to do. But with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Okay, second.
Second.
We're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.